Hi there. So let me begin by asking you a very simple, straightforward question. Are you a leader? Yes? No? Maybe? All right. Whatever the answer. If you are a leader, this is going to be an interesting talk for you. But if you're not, if you're aspiring to be a leader, this is still going to be a relevant talk to you. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about delegation. What is delegation? What it is not, and how do you delegate, and all of that. Okay. So first and foremost, in simple words, delegation means you are sharing some part of your responsibility or tasks to other people in your team. Sometimes also outside your team, but mostly within your team. So if you're a leader, you have 10 tasks on your table, you decide to delegate some of those to your team members. In plain, simple English, that's what delegation means. Now, without making it any further complicated, let's try and understand why is delegation important. So this is something which I've heard, and it kind of fascinates me every time I hear this. But a lot of leaders have this habit of saying, if I don't go to office, my team doesn't function with complete efficiency. Nothing moves in the office if I'm not there. But I'm saying, is that something to be proud about or something to be worried about? Well, the fact is that you want your team to function even without you. And therefore, you got to learn to delegate. You got to learn to understand that there are people in your team who can do the job that you do, or perhaps do a better job. So there are two primary reasons why one should delegate. Number one, for personal growth. If you do not delegate, then perhaps you are the biggest roadblock in your own corporate career success. You can't go to the next level because you haven't created anyone in your team who can do what you can do. And therefore, you're becoming your biggest enemy by not delegating. So first and foremost, understand this, that delegation is important for any leader, no matter who you are, whether you're 5 people in your team or 50 people in your team or even more, right? You need to start to delegate. So identify people who can do your job. Secondly, if you do not delegate, then people in your team over a period of time would get frustrated. Not all of them, but especially the performers, especially people who believe that they can go to the next level, would love their manager to delegate some task to them. And therefore, you cannot deny people this fundamental right, an opportunity to go to the next level. And the only way they can do that is by learning the tricks of the trade, by understanding what it is all about before they go to that role, which is in their current role. And therefore, as a leader, as a manager, you've got to provide people with that opportunity, right? So two reasons, one for personal growth, the second is for your people's growth. Those are two fundamental reasons, and I believe more than sufficient reasons for you to look at delegation. So the question is, if delegation is so important, then why people don't do it? Well, it's a long story, but let me cut it short for you. There are two primary reasons why people do not delegate. Number one is lack of trust. Now, it's slightly complicated to explain, but in simple language, it means nobody trusts others more than they trust themselves. So for example, if there is a task that I believe I can do, I also believe that only I can do it and no one else can do it. Or perhaps I believe that I can do full justice to the task, others not really so much. And that is something which often prevents a lot of leaders from delegating. They don't trust their people enough, right? That's one of the fundamental flaws in leadership, which prevents people from delegating. The other thing could be personal insecurity. If I delegate a task to someone else and I know that he or she can do a better job, well, that person might hog the limelight, and I might look like not such a great leader after all. But the fact is that unless you delegate, you would first of all not get to know who's good at what. And the second thing is, you cannot deny people the opportunity to be under the limelight, especially if they're good. So this is more so a personal fear, a personal insecurity that you need to deal with, you need to comprehend with. So lack of trust and personal security are two primary reasons because of which people do not delegate. Now, there could be other reasons as well. Sometimes, for example, you do not have people in your team who are worthy of delegation. Maybe they're too young, too fresh, they don't have the experience, or perhaps your organization doesn't support delegation as a concept in totality. So there could be other reasons as well, but trust and insecurity are the primary reasons because of which people do not delegate. Now, enough of problems. How do we delegate? We know now that delegation is important, but how do I do it? So here are a few tricks for you to understand in order to delegate well. Number one, always delegate small. Now, what do I mean by that? Is if you have a task which requires 2 weeks to complete, you don't want to start with something like that. Start with a task which just takes 2 hours to complete so that you have better control on it. Even if a person messes up, you still have the time to recover from the lost time. But if you give something which will take 2 weeks or 2 months, that is going to take a lot of monitoring on your part, which might not be a good idea to begin with. So start small, start something which is easy to do. And it also helps people gain confidence when they start working on that task. So number one is start small. Number two, split the task. You don't want only 1 or 2 people in your team who can do everything and the rest of them are good for nothing. That's not a typical scenario. So whenever you have a larger chunk of work, split that up into different team members. You want most of your team members to have exposure to different kinds of skill sets. It's also an opportunity for you to see who is good at the same piece of work. So if you split a work amongst 4 people, you now have an opportunity to look at all 4 of them and then judge who amongst them is better suited, is better equipped for what kind of task. Also, splitting the task will allow you to have an opportunity to ensure that there is always a backup. You don't want 1 or 2 people to hijack your agenda and say, you know what, only I can do it, so you have to give it to me. That shouldn't be the case. So split it up so that it makes it easier for you as a leader to monitor and also to keep a plan B in place. Number 3, you got to prepare people for delegation. Many a times leaders want to delegate, but their team members say, you know what, thank you, but no thanks, right? So you want to prepare people mentally and skill-wise before you delegate them something, which means you got to talk to them. And there is a good practice which leaders do, effective leaders do. It's called delegation meeting. What is a delegation meeting? Right before you delegate a task, talk to people, understand their concerns, help them with the task that you're going to delegate, prepare them, motivate them, encourage them, provide them the tools. All of this happens in the delegation meeting. So you've got to prepare people before they take up any responsibility off your plate. So that's very important. Number 4, as far as possible, do not delegate when you're very close to a client target. Let's say, for example, you have a target to complete next week and you decide to delegate something today to one of your team members. Well, what if he or she isn't able to deliver on time? That jeopardizes the entire deliverable. So as far as possible, avoid delegating when you're close to a target. A good time to delegate is when you're just starting a new project so that you have ample time for recovery in case there is any kind of goof up. So that's something you must realize whenever you're delegating, because you don't want to put yourself or the team member under unnecessary stress by delegating close to a target. Number 5, never ever delegate anything which is of confidential nature or anything which is of sensitive nature. Why? Because you could have leakage of information and that could backfire big time. So avoid delegating anything which is of confidential nature, because that is meant for you to perform and perhaps that is your sole responsibility. So do not delegate such tasks. The other thing you want to also club along with this is never delegate 100% of your tasks, because then that renders you useless as a team leader, right? So you want to have something on your plate which is more important, which is more critical, and then the ancillary tasks can be split up in your team members. Last but not the least, whenever you delegate, don't just delegate responsibility, also delegate authority. Now, that's a big one. What does that mean? For example, if you're not going to be there in the office for a week and you've asked one of your senior team members to look after the team, that is a responsibility. But along with that, you also got to hand over authority to this team member. You got to tell this team member that, look, in my absence, if you need to take some harsh calls, please do go ahead. You can just keep me posted, but I give you that authority. A lot of leaders make the mistake of only delegating responsibility without delegating authority. And that's a mismatch that kind of completely makes the game uneven. So you got to make sure that it is easier for the person to manage his or her additional tasks with the additional authority that has been given to him or her. So those are a few things that you must remember when it comes to effective delegation. Delegation is neither easy nor difficult, but it is something that you must learn as a leader, and it is something that you must start doing. Even if you're not a leader, it's important that you understand delegation, because you cannot do everything on your own. Or let me put it this way, you should not do everything on your own, right? So try delegation. And do let me know how this works for you. And I'll be very, very keen to learn from you if this has helped you and given you some insights about performing your duties and your role better. I wish you all the very best. Thank you for now.